So picture this. You're walking through an apple orchard. It's fall. You're admiring the hues, the fragrances, the whole atmosphere of things. Then you go ahead and pick an apple from one of the trees. You go ahead, kind of analyze it, admire its texture, its beauty, and you decide to take a bite out of it. But for some reason, there's a sweet sourness that touches your tongue. Believe it or not, you actually just bit into an orange. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the fascinating yet terrifying reality of genetically modified organisms. Genetically modified foods have become a staple in our society. According to the Center of Food Supply, approximately 45% of corn and 85% of soybeans are genetically modified. This leads to approximately 70 to 75% of our processed food supply being genetically modified in one way or another. It's essentially becoming impossible to avoid genetically modified foods on a day-to-day basis. But consumers aren't necessarily aware or given the choice of the risks of genetically modified organisms. I've conducted extensive research in the topic and weighed both of the sides of the argument and have concluded the risk that is genetically modified organisms. In truth, genetically modified organisms have a negative externality that the public are not aware of. In order to combat this, there needs to be regulations and restrictions done by the government in order to combat it. I'll be talking about the effects of genetically modified organisms on the health of the consumer, the environment, organisms, and then as well what the effect is on the economy. Following, I'll discuss some steps that the government can take in order to kind of alleviate the situation and what we can do actively in order to fix the situation. So first of all, genetically modified foods have adverse effects that people are unaware of. One of the major concerns of genetically modified foods on health is the development of allergies. Genetically modified foods, according to the Institute of Responsible Technology, modify the proteins that plants and animals make. As such, these proteins can cause allergic reactions that are foreign originally. In fact, sometimes these genetically modified foods can lead to allergic reactions to foods that are not even genetically modified. The concern is dire, and in fact, many producers have stopped using genetically modified foods for this specific reason. Studies have also shown that genetically modified foods can lead to disease. According to Golden Harvest Organics, rats fed genetically modified foods have had higher incidences of stomach cancer as well as some differences in the reproductive system. In the most severe case, some animals had in fact became sterile. The effects of GMOs don't also stop at the consumer. Genetically modified organisms have a huge effect on the environment they are grown in. Toxicity is one of the major concerns of genetically modified organisms. According to One Green Planet, to tend to plants that need genetic modifications, there is the necessity of pesticides and insecticides. This toxicity easily spreads through the environment and affects organisms at all different levels of the food chain. Furthermore, animals that help with the pollination, such as bees and butterflies, are not adaptable to genetically modified organisms, and as such, they're in fact becoming endangered. Furthermore, since we are genetically modifying organisms, we are essentially introducing mutations to the environment. According to One Green Planet, these mutations have long-standing effects that could eventually lead to extinction of the current species in favor of the genetically modified species. Genetically modified animals are also tortured when it comes to testing. These genes are injected into the animal, and a lot of times they're knockout animals, which are purposely killed in order to see what would happen with or without the specific gene. According to the Institute of Responsible Technology, when it comes to testing of different genetic strains, animals are put in horrible conditions, such as cages and hot boxes. It is clear that genetically modified foods do have negative externalities. As such, it is important to deal with the situation in an almost economic manner. In essence, we have to decrease the demand and the supply of genetically modified organisms. This can be done through regulation and labeling. According to the FDA, there are limited regulations and restrictions on genetically modified foods. In fact, genetically modified organisms, as long as they do not look too much different from the original product, are automatically considered safe for the market, and they do not need to undergo any other testing. It'd be beneficial to increase government regulation because we truly do not understand the long-term effects of these foods, as can be seen by the rat models who develop stomach cancer or develop some sort of sterility. It is crucial that these foods are taken to an animal model and tested long-term rather than seeing the effects happen to humans later down the road. There also should be a different process in authorizing genetically modified foods for the market because as of right now, genetically modified foods and regular organic foods are considered equivalent, which is not right. Also, it would be beneficial to start labeling genetically modified foods. At the moment, a consumer can go to the supermarket and he can't really tell what is genetically modified and what isn't. This is taking away the consumer's opinion in the issue. If the consumer was given the opinion, or at least knew what was going on in terms of the genetic engineering in the foods, they probably would deter away from consuming it and make better decisions. This would in fact stop allergic reactions from occurring in the future. This would help the environment, for producers would not now need to produce genetically modified organisms because there would be no demand for it, or there would be a lesser demand. As such, toxicity would decrease, the mutations that we would be introducing into the environment decrease, and everything overall would be in a better condition. So it is time that we put the decision to consume genetically modified foods in the hands of the consumer. The labels will be presented next to the nutritional labels, so it's easily accessible. Just like any gluten-free foods have, which have a very noticeable logo that says it's gluten-free, there'll be a genetic engineering logo as well. That way consumers will know instantaneously that this is genetically engineered, and in fact, this would incentivize them to go home and kind of educate themselves on the issue. This would decrease the supply as well, and overall regulation would occur. So then the question remains, what can the public do in order to fix the situation? One of the biggest things that they could do is them actively protesting genetically modified foods. They need to do research and read into what is genetically modified and what isn't. By consuming things that are more organic, these companies that have genetically modified organisms would not necessarily shut down, but would decrease their production. Also, it would be necessary to lobby for against genetically modified foods, because the biggest point of control is the government. This can be done by teaming up with organizations such as the Non-GMO Project. Overall, genetically modified foods do have a huge impact on our economy and on our health. So it's about time that we take things into our own hands and make this world a brighter place.